back to the reading of the kids' book in a little bit. So we'll leave that for later. Right now, I'll just start off just introducing myself. Who am I? So we were talking to some of you that I didn't grow up in Minnesota. So growing up in South Dakota, when I ended up coming to Mankato State for college, I just had a lot of why is it called Blue Earth County? Who's this LeSueur fellow? And I just had curiosity about some of the place names. I figured out South Dakota pretty quickly. And so I came here and it just opened up this whole can of worms. And just something about me as an author, I'm a little out of the box. And so why that is, well, I kind of describe it, it's like I was raised by Rambo and Ma Ingalls. So my father was a Vietnam vet, this like alpha male of all alpha males. And then my mom was like this earth mother nurturer type. And so it really depended on the time of day, depending on what sort of like upraising I was getting. But I've been a storyteller since I was a wee lad. And so as a young kid, I was already working on, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew I loved stories. For example, this right here is the first book that I made. I got a fourth grade assignment, and oh boy, I thought Miss Briggs was something else, and so I really wanted to impress Miss Briggs, and so I worked on this, and it shows me now how weird I was then. At the time, I didn't realize how weird I was, but even now I look back, it's like, yeah, you were one really messed up little fourth grader, because the story was and this is something that's kind of like what I like to do. I love mashups, where you kind of take a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and you put them together to make something new. So my first story was a mashup of the Odyssey, which I just read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and I can tell that now looking back because my main character was a spin-off on what happened to Diomed. Because at the time I felt it was injustice that he was such an awesome character in chapter 5 only, and I never knew what happened to him. So I invented a story, and since they were Greeks, I had another thing that I had read, the book of Revelation. And where did John get the book of Revelation? The island of Patmos, which is a Greek island. So I thought it'd be cool to mash those two things together. And so in the story then, I have my Greek heroes running into Apollyon and his little insect minions from one of the plagues. So that's what you get with me, okay? Yes?
Now the Odyssey, I read it in college, but as a child of 4th grade, did you read a simplified version of the Odyssey, or did you actually read the real Odyssey of Homer?
I know. I wish I knew better. Likely, probably, since I was reading the book of Revelation at the same time.
Oh, that's right.
I was an ambitious reader.
You were.
And so that was, again, I was out in the corner of the playground, finger up my nose, reading books, So ultimately, then, the other thing that inspired me so much is about the time 4th grade rolled around, Indiana Jones came out. And I just absolutely was floored by Indiana Jones. And it became kind of my mantra, my style. So when people say, okay, what are your books about? What genre? I hate that question.
Yeah.
Because I have problems with being in the box. And so I say I like histories, mysteries, legends, and lore, because that's Indiana Jones. And so my stories then are kind of a little bit of everything. And so I wanted to be Indiana Jones growing up. When I went to MSU, and that was not one of the majors you could sign up for, I ended up becoming an English teacher, okay? And so now, after 27 years of teaching, I am a full-time writer now. Again, I'm an author most of the time. I am a reporter for a local newspaper. I taught journalism during those years, and so now I'm just doing little small stories. And then I'm also doing kind of some video journalism work too, so that's just a little bit about me. So you understand who this raving lunatic is in front of you. So now I'll introduce you to my book family. We picked the topic for tonight to keep it a little historical. And so my Alchemist Chronicles then kind of features some local Minnesota legends in an Indiana Jones style. That's kind of how I roll. So last year I talked about Joseph Nicolet. Today we're going to be talking about Pierre-Charles LeSueur. And if you enjoy the show, maybe next year you can have me back for Baron Lahoughton, who is the strangest of them all. And so that's that series. I also do a kind of a supernatural series. I love folklore, legends, mythology. And so in that one, it's kind of a supernatural series set in northern Minnesota. Not going to talk about that one today. Because my mom was the church secretary, I have a whole series of Bible studies, but I also say like, hey, that's very Indiana Jones, he can teach you a few things, about, so that's kind of one of the series that I do. And then because now I have grandkids, I like to, do some kids books too. And so I wanted to capture some of these historical figures and make it a little easier to understand. And sometimes it's for the grown-ups too, the Cliff Note versions of the stories. And so those are my book babies. Now what we're going to do, since I am a teacher, one of the things I always like to do is like find out what my students know. So it's enough about me. Now I'm going to see what kind of audience I have. So we're going to play a little bit of Jeopardy. And the categories for today are Jeopardy board. We've got great faces for the first category. Great places. Anybody know what I just did there?
Rhymed.
It did, yep. South Dakota license plates. That's like great faces, great places, South Dakota. Okay, there was a song. Okay, the next one then we have indigenous races, French fried, since we got a lot of Frenchmen in our story today. Blue clues, which is what you were trying to get me to give away all the answers for.
I'll be quiet.
And then because I'm a fan of Indiana Jones, we'll have a whole category on legends. Now, because of what happened in Sioux Falls, we're not going to play with points or teams. There's going to be no throwing of chairs. The points don't matter, okay? He told me I didn't have to sign the legal waiver, but we're just going to play cool, okay? So all we're going to do is we're just going to go through the categories. Now, the reason why I like to do the Jeopardy board concept is these are kind of my fact nuggets that I had to play with. So before I sat down and wrote the book, these are just all the things that are just like my building blocks. And so if you were to dump them all out on the table, that's what I kind of picked and chose from to be able to put my story together. So at least these are, for the most part, the uncontested facts. so we'll use these as our backbone. So we'll jump in then. Our first category, great faces. Daniel Graysolin. That's kind of you may not know that name. But his title of Loot is the namesake for this Lake Superior city.
Lutzen.
Oh, close.
Must be
Duluth. There it is. And so he was the Sieur of Duluth, and so that's where we get the name. So he was running around during the LeSueur time. So I thought that was kind of fun. Another person that was running around at the time period, he even got himself a portrait there. This Jesuit explorer discovered a portage from Michigan to the Mississippi River, and thus ended up with a Michigan university named after him.
Father Hennepin?
Ooh, he went the other way.
Oh, sorry.
Marquette, there you go.
Marquette.
So Père Marquette. Père means father, and so he was running around at the time period too, and I incorporated him in the beginning chapters of the book, Jacques Marquette. And this is another one. He was a little bit more obscure, but you're going to have a city name that you might recognize. This Illinois explorer, he was with Marquette, has a city named after him after locating the Mississippi River. And what I loved about his story, kind of like the building blocks, he had two near-death situations. Actually, one time he almost died, and then the last time he just vanished off the face of the earth. And so I was all like, ooh, some mystery and intrigue. Anybody know who this square-jawed fella is?
Joliet.
Ooh, nice one. I remember you rocking it last year, too. All right, so Louis Joliet, yes. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Wow, this guy had the makings of being like Christopher Columbus kind of name. But this French explorer traveled from Lake Superior down the Mississippi River. But when he tried to find the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico, his own men killed him in a mutiny.
Jean Lafitte?
Ooh, not quite. That was very French, though.
Every time I say something's wrong.
You just make those noises when we get to the French category, and it'll probably be close enough. Okay, anybody know this one? I think there's a, no, I was thinking there's a French town, but I think that's the wrong one. Yeah. Okay, we're going to draw a blank on this one. Yeah, again, he was trying to unite the Great Lakes and the Gulf of Mexico. LaSalle.
Oh, of course.
LaSalle. And so, yeah, his own men killed him, and they covered it up. They didn't find out for several years later that he'd been killed. Okay, and the last great face then, an English pirate hunter. So this guy was running around during the time of LeSueur. He was arrested and executed in London, but not after his name became associated with the treasure of Oak Island. So he was kind of an infamous pirate because of his treasure connections. I got a whole book about him in the other one, but he shows up in this book too. Anybody know this one? Got it?
No, it's
Oh.
Captain Cook, no?
Oh, very close. It's short like that.
Captain Kidd.
There it is, Captain
Captain
Kidd. So Captain William Kidd. So he's running around during the same lifetime as LeSueur. All right, now we're going to go to a new category. We're going to have great places. So in the late 1600s, France almost succeeded in connecting the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico, naming their southern colony after their king. So what was that southern colony called? Got a lot of snow recently. Louisiana, ding, ding, ding. So that was, of course, because of King Louis the, 14th or 16th? I always mess that up.
Son King 14?
Yeah, something like that. And he was like the world power back in that time. Okay, meanwhile, because it was a defensible island in the St. Lawrence River, this city became the heart of New France. Now, what is New France called today?
Quebec?
Canada.
Quebec?
Oh, there you go. It's in Quebec. So Montreal. There we go. And so, and what was cool about this, I gotta watch the clock because otherwise I can stay here for 3 hours. But you can see Montreal in the St. Lawrence Riverway. The other cool thing about it with the folklore kind of stuff is the Anishinaabe people went here because they thought it was like a sacred location for them, and they were following shells, and if you look at it, the shell is actually like the island too, so I don't know. I just thought that was really cool. All right, this massive geographic roadblock slowed down commerce on the Great Lakes en route to Montreal. So things would have been easier if you didn't have this big bump for your canoe. What's the big geographical bump that got it?
Niagara.
There you go. And so Niagara Falls was because otherwise you could start in like Duluth Harbor and you could paddle all your way down until you got to Niagara Falls. And so they put up a fort at that time period to be able to control things. All right, same area. We're talking Canada a little bit, but this one isn't. Meaning big turtle. This island became a strategic commercial and military crossroads between two Great Lakes. And today it's got a big old bridge. There it is, yep. So Mackinac means Turtle Island. And that's, that was one of the, I probably have a dozen or more chapters set at Mackinac, because that was just like, the it place on the frontier at the time. So LeSueur was the commander at Mackinac. Okay, this gets a little darker. Rumors of cannibalism, ghosts, and a century of war left this island on Lake Superior abandoned at the Anishinaabe, then known as the Chippewa, pushed into Minnesota. Now, I would contest the historians, because after I did my LeSueur research, I was all like, they got their facts wrong. Because Nicholas Perot's wife has the namesake of this island to this day. Know the name of the island that was like, it was a commercial place, but it had a dark backstory to it. Ooh, ding, ding, ding. Perot's wife was named Madeline. And so there's another guy that claims credit now because his wife was named Madeline, but I was like, LeSueur and Perot were out there, and he had 12 kids, and he was naming all the islands after his kids, and his wife's name was Madeline. I was like, oh, whoever swapped the names out, you got some answering to do. It's a history book back now. Michael Cadet, I think, was the guy that gets credit. Slippery. It's like, hey, my wife's named Madeline too. Honey, I got an island named after you. Okay, so indigenous races. So we're going to shift gears. So Father Louis Hennepin, we were talking about him, was abducted and almost killed when making contact with this tribe called Again, derogatory term, the snakes by the other tribes.
Sue.
Sioux. And so the French were all like, what'd you call them? And so they literally wrote it down before they actually made contact. So that word caught on, where it wasn't even the accurate word for them. Their enemies called them that. Of course, here are the other terms, and depending which era you're looking at, it's been changed through the years, and so, of course, Ocheti-Sakowin is kind of the most encompassing of all of them. All right, also in indigenous races, the $200 question, France made a strategic alliance with this Great Lakes tribe to invade the lands west of the Mississippi. It was a power play. They were one of the major movers and shakers of the time period. They were a New York tribe.
You know that you're from New York.
Be the Iroquois Confederation.
I'm sorry. Oh, I screwed up. I said the New York tribe, and I was wrong. Sorry.
That's why I didn't know this was New York.
I know my facts, and I went and screwed it up. Okay, so you already saw the answer. The French allied themselves with the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the English. That's probably the next question. Okay, there it is. Sorry, I was jumping ahead on my own slideshow. During the 9 Years' War, America and Britain allied itself with this New York tribe. See what I did there? Okay, sorry, there we got it. So I messed that one up. All right, $400 question. This one's a little bit trickier. This one is a small tribe, but it has a Great Lake name. Its leader, fascinating character. Again, once I did a little deep dive into this guy, I was like, wow, he's something else. He helped win the 9 Years' War for France, defeating England and its allies. Apparently one of the great minds of the entire continent. He was a strategist that everybody revered. And so it was the Huron, and the guy that I was talking about, the leader of the Huron, some texts he's referred to as a Dario. His Christianized name, he picked Gaspar after a wise man. He's one of the Magi, so that guy did his research before he picked his name. Otherwise, he was known as Kondiaronk, which was the muskrat, because this guy was a guerrilla fighter. He'd pop his head up, attack, and disappear. And that's how strategic he was. He was a fascinating character. All right, a little closer to home. $500 question. The people of the Red Earth is what their name means. And they saw it, especially time period, this time, they saw it as their sacred duty to keep their enemies on the other side of the river. Even if it meant dying to the last man in a genocidal war with France. Again, this changed, but when I was looking at the 1600s time period, wow, it was like, They were pretty intense. And again, they're kind of a Great Lakes tribe. Anybody know who I'm talking about? Who got in a kind of a scrap with the United States, France, and Great Britain? These guys, again, they almost did fight to the last man. It is a whole other side story I can get into. Anybody know this one? They were known as the Fox Indians, otherwise known as the Meskwaki. So they were a major factor during the time period. Kind of it, from their perspective, it's one thing, but from the other people's perspective, it was the antagonist. And so Chief Blackhawk, for example, took on the United States government and became commemorized for just his bravery. Now, we're on to French fried, so you were practicing your French names earlier, so let's see how we do. France reached its zenith under the leadership of this king, known as the Sun King. Okay, you guys are like, come on, bring it, Willis. Okay, so Louis XIV. Okay, the French fancied felt, which came from the fur of this creature. he's doing like the gestures over there. All right, the beaver. And so this time period, they referred to them as the Beaver Wars then too. And so that's kind of at the end of it. So there you go. And speaking of wars, World War Zero is how I refer to this one, because we call it World War I is in the last century, but the Grand Alliance during this time period that England forged, they were going toe to toe with France for global domination, and so what's the asking for here? England made so name one of England's powerful allies, and so when it went global, they all sided up. So who did England side up for? No, this is French, so it must be who France sided with. There you go. perfect. They were Catholic countries compared to Protestant countries, and so it became like a religious world war also. And on the other side then, one factor in the alliances was religious affiliation. What denomination did France support? They were the Catholics, and then the English were the Protestants. I think I just gave that one away by accident. All right, a little bit trickier one. We're going to go a little cross-cultural with sci-fi question here. Star Wars creator George Lucas claimed that this organization of warrior monks influenced his idea of the Jedi.
Knights of Malta.
Oh, that's actually way more specific than I wanted. I'd give you a bonus point for that one. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking for a lot more generic answer. The Jesuits. Yeah, so you went like very specific with that one. So I was like, okay, I know what he's talking about. Yep. And so the Jesuits in North America, again, they could fight, they could research, they could evangelize. So they were kind of the warrior monks, if you think of them that way. All right, now we shifted gears now. Now we're in the category of Blues Clues, and there's a reason for this one because one of the mysterious part about LeSueur is his stinking copper mine. And it's like, oh, there's also, and then we go into the Joseph Nicollet story, and you heard me talk about him last year. So there's some perplexing things that, as a fan of Indiana Jones, I was all like, oh, I could put that in my novel. Okay, so this legendary object could turn lead into gold. What am I talking about?
Philosopher's Stone.
The Philosopher's Stone. And so I bring that one up because in the time period, they believed it could be found out on the frontier of America. And so, but you had to look for the right clues. We'll talk about the clues in a little bit here. In the pre-science of alchemy, these were, again, it'd be a lot easier to study for your elements test in science. But these were the 4 elements. What are the 4 basic elements of alchemy? Earth, fire, air, and water. And so the green book that I made, the LeSueur one, I made it green because it was the earth one. The blue one, blue represents water. That's Joseph Nicollet. The gold one represents air. That's my pirate book. And then the last one is going to be the Alchemist's Tomb. That's going to be the red one. So I kind of stuck to that. Here we go. Okay. This southern Minnesota town is a translation for the Dakota word for blue earth. Joseph Nicollet put this on the map. Except he's got a very, very bad H. His H became an N. Oh, come on, it's in Blue Earth County.
Not Mankato.
Mankato. So Mankato means Blue Earth. And so, and then of course the H became smaller and became an N. So that was a typographical mistake. So that's Mankato. Now, this is where we start hooking into some of the LeSueur stuff. Copper rust. So if you look at copper pipes, the stuff that kind of corrodes around it, copper rust was once known as ormus. That's some old school alchemy legends there. I was like, wow, what am I doing down here in this rabbit hole? But much later, another word for copper rust is a Latin acronym that also means corrosive. You hear it used in politics all the time now. Toxic is nice. I take that one too. Okay, give you points for that one. But the Latin, I'll say the Latin phrase, visita interio rectificando, invidiis occultum, terra rectificando, invidiis occultum lapidum. And that was the whole Latin phrase, and it translates as, visit the interior of the earth, by rectification you shall find the hidden stone. And then this, I was like, seriously? And so I found this, and it was like one of my favorite little building blocks, because what is vitriol? It's blue earth. What does the word vitriol come from? It's an alchemy word. It's their clue. How do you find the Philosopher's Stone? Apparently, the thing that can change lead into gold, if you just leave it sitting out on the cupboard, it's going to turn everything around into vitriol. So they went looking for what out on the frontier? Blue earth. And so I was like, wow, that's wild. Okay, the last blues clues, and again, I found this one. This was some older research. The Chetty-Sakowin, the Seven Council Fires, they looked up into the heavens and saw the 7 stars of the Big Dipper as their symbol for their identity. Now, again, you all probably are familiar with what happened to the Dakota people and trying to erase their culture. This one was from, like, again, the time period. And I found a professor who went into the older stories than what you've probably heard in recent years. But anybody know the blue clue for this one? So the Chetty-Sakowin saw themselves as the blue woman. And so the blue woman is the constellation that we see as the Big Dipper. Her name is, again, I'm from South Dakota, I say everything wrong. But Tunwin then was the representation of their nation in the stars. And what's cool about it, there's 7 tribes, 4 in Minnesota, a couple in South Dakota, and then way out in the Black Hills. The 4 stars are where they were at even.
Wow.
So I was like, it's a map of their entire, it's like, wow, that really floored me. So of course I had to use this one when I found this one. Okay, now we're into legends. And so now I'm just looking for things to make the novel work. So this biblical warrior judge was famous for his strength, his weakness for women, and his long hair. Samson. And so when I was researching Pierre-Charles LeSueur, I'd see his footprints all over the place in history, but I never, there wasn't a lot of good details about him, except for the fact that he was a monster of a man. And I was like, oh, since I don't know his personality, I'm gonna put a lot of Samson metaphors into his story. So he has some women issues in his life. Okay, so there we go. Now, Sacre Bleu, a large French lumberjack roaming the woods between Maine and Minnesota, that's LeSueur. But when I say it like that, who does it sound like? Paul Bunyan. And I was like, wait a second. Bunyan? French? LeSueur? French? Bunyan? Massive? LeSueur? Massive? Great Lakes? I was like, oh, where's the Blue Ox? Okay, and so if you look at even the research behind the name, Bunyan is an 1800 story, but the lore might be referencing a real guy. And so I was all like, could Pierre-Charles LeSueur have been the inspiration? Because he was a legendary guy. And so that's where I thought there was a lot of coincidences with the names. All right, another one for legends in both books, in the Alchemy Chronicles series. This celestial omen appears in the sky every 75 years. So when Nicollet came to America, what's in the sky? And when Pierre-Charles LeSueur was there 150 years earlier, it was also, there you got it, what?
Halley's Comet?
Yep, Halley's Comet. Halley was running around during this time period. So the comet was an interesting thing that I just had to include too. All right, the $400 one, beware. The Unctahi, the Manitou, the Leviathan, all kind of describe this kind of monster.
Sea monster.
There you go. And so in Legends and Lore, I also came across this one, that they had water monsters, the horned serpent kind of stuff. I was like, okay, I gotta remember how to include that one too. The last question then, famously found in Last of the Mohicans, the legend of a maiden's leap also inspired the namesake of this Minnesota river town. And there's actually, just north of the town, there's a place that's called Maiden Rock, where the story is she leapt to her death. Now the story is all over North America, which makes me think of wow, where's the origin story from? And so, but there's a Minnesota town that's named after this. It's a Dakota word that means daughter. And it's kind of a Romeo and Juliet story. She fell in love with a guy she wasn't supposed to fall in love with, and when she couldn't have, she ended up pulling a Juliet, and off the rock she went. And I was all like, oh, LeSueur's a lover boy too. So all of a sudden I was like, Winona is her name. So the legend of Winona was like rooted in this time period also. So suddenly I have my female character.
Should go shoplifting.
Yeah. All right, so our final one then, and then we'll shift gears and kind of get it back into the kids' book version of the story, is Puppet Masters. So when I was playing with all my facts, those are my 30 facts to build my story from, I realized that I needed to have a good villain. So I went looking in this time period for a proper villain. And of course, my character's French, so where do you think I found him? English. So here's your clue. When LeSueur was kidnapped by English pirates, he was likely kept as a political prisoner. He was a lord, for example. He was likely kept as a political prisoner in the Tower of London, where this secret alchemist served as the warden of the mint. Now, why would they have an alchemist serve as warden of the mint? Because they believed lead could be turned into gold, and they were worried about counterfeiting. So this guy had ties to alchemy. You don't say that out loud, but to catch a thief, you gotta hire a thief. And so anybody know who this famous scientist is that worked in the Tower of London?
Not Newton.
Oh,
Oh, I was right.
Isaac Newton. He'd already made his claim in science, and then he became a political puppet master. And so being the warden of the mint allowed him, he had the money of England. And so he was able to, I had a fascinating time period for him. And then we found out years after he was dead that he had an obsession with alchemy too. So there we go. Okay, so that's our warm-up. Now what I'm going to do next, I'm just going to shift gears here. And we're going to now kind of do things a little simplified. I've got a 500-page novel that I'm going to read for you now. Luckily, I have, oops, I left my remote over there. After I wrote the novel version, sitting around a campfire one day with my nephew, I was telling him about the book, and he made the comments just like, sounds a lot like Paul Bunyan to me. And so what I did with this one then is, he's a graphic designer, and so we simplified the story. And so I'm going to share this. It'll be like a little 10-minute rip through, and I'm giving away all the plot right now. So I said this is the Cliff Note time. But when we get done then, I'm going to do, since tall tales are a little bit of fact and a little bit of fiction, we'll back up then once I rip through the book, and we'll kind of go through like what's true and what's not, and kind of like shock you a little bit with the real life of LeSueur. All right, the camera guys are running around. Okay, I'll stay in one spot now. All right, so I'll just make sure that keep on track here. All right, again, my nephew's the graphic designer. All right, so 'twas 1657 in the land of France that a giant baby was born, so big he didn't fit into his pants. What shall we feed him? What shall we do? We'll send him to America where there's space and everything's new. So young Pierre-Charles LeSueur sprang like a deer, jumping across icebergs without any fear. What a fun adventure, so much to see. I'll grow up big in America. I wonder what I'll be. The Jesuits were exploring out on the frontier. LeSueur's arrival filled them with cheer. Help us with fishing, help us with camp. Lift up our boats so our robes don't get damp. Day after day, season after season, LeSueur went outdoors for any good reason. He cut down trees and caught lots of fish. He got stronger and stronger, but he had one big wish. What's west of west? What's out there to find? Will the new people I meet be scary or kind? Is there wealth or treasure or some lost loot? So he put on his suspenders and his best hiking boots. But a problem came up. People couldn't get along. They looked to LeSueur because he was so strong. The English in the south, the French in the north, the Iroquois and Huron all came forth. We need some order, a man we can trust. LeSueur agreed. Then I'll run your trading post if I must. So LeSueur ran the trading post. It's what he did best. But his heart still desired to discover the West. One day in Wisconsin, while clearing some trees, he heard a voice crying, help me, please. I promise my nephew wouldn't do the voice anymore. I'm sorry for my acting abilities. Okay, help me, please. Her name was Winona, a Dakota from out west. It was love at first sight, but I'll spare you the rest, except for the adult version of the book. You get to read that one. Okay, all right. So back at the trading post, business was booming. LeSueur and Winona made quite a team, but trouble was looming. Beyond the Mississippi is where she was from, and never seeing her family made her quite glum. There you go. Her people were called the Seven Council Fires Nation, and they lived far to the west of the fur trading nation. Tunwin is a land with 10,000 lakes. The Blue Woman it is called, and it is why my heart aches. Winona taught him her language and all about the stars, but her home was so far away it felt more distant than Mars. I live near the haunted valley where the earth bleeds blue. It is guarded by a water monster with great big horns too. I'm not afraid of anything, and I'd really like to see the land of the Blue Woman. Could you please take me? LeSueur traveled more streams and rivers than he could tally, until Winona finally brought him to the infamous Haunted Valley. That is the Blue Earth. Some think it is magic. If we stay here much longer, the outcome will be tragic. They ran into trouble just like she thought. Winona found her lost family, but LeSueur got caught. Please don't hurt him. He was nice to me. Let him go back. Set him free. I had to really simplify this for the kids. Okay? Our sister is staying. Let's make that clear. Come back to these lands and you'll have reason to fear. LeSueur left Winona quite broken-hearted. He returned to Montreal, but a new adventure started. I found some weird dirt, quite strange and blue. I think it is special. What shall I do? This blue earth is mysterious. It's something strange to see. Take it back to France. Take it across the sea. The trip went smoothly, and he made it to France. He told the king about the dirt, and Louis took a chance. I'll make you a miner and give you all you need. Here are your tools. You may proceed. So LeSueur returned back across the Atlantic. When pirates appeared, he was quite frantic. The pirates were English, and they took him to a tower. There he met an alchemist who had all the power. I know your mission. I caught you blue-handed. Tell me your secrets or you'll be reprimanded. LeSueur thought of Winona, who he really missed, and he kept his secrets away from the English scientist. While LeSueur was stuck in prison, the guys in Montreal kept trying to find the place with Blue Earth, but without LeSueur, they kept dying. I had to ask my middle school, kindergarten teachers and stuff, is it okay if we have death in the book? Because I don't know what else to do with that section, so I don't know, that always cracks me up there. I like the little skulls that he made. We'll come back and explain those a little bit. Okay. Back at his tower, LeSueur was quite amazed. This strange scientist was entirely crazed. I have analyzed your blue earth, and copper it's not. So I did some reading to see what we've got. A long time ago, a great treasure was lost, and scientists have been searching for it no matter the cost. The treasure creates vitriol. That part is known. I think you've discovered the Philosopher's Stone. The treasure I seek is more important than England and France. By releasing you, at least we've got a chance. Instead of returning west, you'll be sent south to the mighty Mississippi. We discovered its mouth. You'll get a new ship and be set free. Go dig up the stone and return it to me. LeSueur was happy, and up the river he went. But a team of friends and enemies were also sent. LeSueur was the leader since he knew the way, and he and his miners paddled day after day. Sneaking in south behind Winona's brothers, LeSueur would have left the miners if he had his druthers. But a promise is a promise, and he had one to keep. So he risked his life to return to the valley so deep. Here is your vitriol. Dig up your dirt, but make it snappy so we don't get hurt. But before they could dig, the wind began to blow and cover the haunted valley with 4 feet of snow. Oh shoot, it looks like we're stuck. We'll be here all winter. It's certainly bad luck. Luckily for the miners, LeSueur was quite bold. He built them a wooden fort to protect them from the cold. He cooked them warm food, buffalo on a stick, and he hoped that his kindness might do the trick. Fort Blue Bull was built quickly. My nephew's like, we gotta get Babe the Blue Ox in there somehow. Okay, so Fort Blue Bull was built quickly. LeSueur was not lazy. But when Nona's cousins showed up asking, are you crazy? Tear this all down and leave the haunted valley. Your lives are in danger. Hurry, don't dally. Rich men sent me here, including the king. I'll let them do the digging and leave in the spring. When the snow finally melted, the miners got right to work. LeSueur worried about digging there. He felt like a jerk. The miners dug deep and made a hole that was large. They packed up the vitriol and put it in a barge. At the bottom of the pit, they found something white. It looked kind of strange. It was an unexpected sight. What is it? What is it? One of the miners wondered. Finders keepers, said another. This mine will be plundered. Then everybody started fighting to take hold of the strange treasure. Even LeSueur got involved, which gave him great pleasure. The white stone is mine, everyone was saying, when in reality, they should have been praying. Winona's brother had come and heard all the noise, so he gathered up all of the boys. The Dakota had found them and caught them blue-handed. They were stuck far from home. In fact, they were stranded. Winona's brothers were angry. They were filled with fury. But Winona knew the strangers and served as the jury. LeSueur explained everything and how he'd been sent to collect a special treasure. And for another chance to see her, he went. I'm glad you came to see me, but you really must know. My brothers are really angry, and so you must go. So what became of the treasure that was called the Philosopher's Stone? The end of the story is not entirely known. Did he give it to Winona for her to protect and keep? Or did he bring it to the Atlantic and throw it in the deep? Did the miners take it and bring it back to France? Or did he return to the tower and make the scientists dance? What we do know is that LeSueur left and sailed down the river with a load of blue earth and scary stories that would make a Frenchman shiver. Stories of LeSueur became legendary, how he roamed through the big woods and out onto the prairie. Is LeSueur the reason we have stories of Tall Paul? Or did writers simply invent it all? LeSueur was so big he could surely break a scale, but that's why his life was perfect for a tall tale. And that's my nephew there. So, all right, now, that's the paraphrased version of what I pieced together. And you're all like, okay, Newton and the Philosopher's Stone, that's silly and fun, but that's not true. And you're right on most of the counts, but there's some stuff that's in here that's disturbing. So we're looking at 20 minutes. I'll put it right at an hour. And so what we're going to do now is, again, that is the kids' book, the full 500-page story. It'll have a whole lot more details than that. But what I'm going to do now is kind of take you back through that and point out what was real. Because he's a fascinating man and did a lot of really cool things. Okay, so the first thing to know about LeSueur then, he was a second son. And what was so interesting about being a second son is being the son of a French nobleman. He had no inheritance waiting for him in France. So being sent out to America was really his only chance to avoid lousy life in Europe. And it was also a chance for him to go out and earn it. And that's what was so exciting about America at the time period, is that it was meritocracy. You know, you could go out and just earn your way up the ladder, you know, as opposed to having to wait for your inheritance for your brother to die or something like that. So that part was kind of like, you know, what was going on in his real life. And New France, of course, was a new settlement looking for able-bodied people. So the real LeSueur then came over as a young man. He was, it's been a while since I wrote this, but it's like, I think he's 12 when they sent him over. You know, so he's about ready to hit puberty, and it's like, good luck, and off he went. Now, what was kind of fun about this one is we put the iceberg in there, but there was a reason for that. in LeSueur's lifetime, during that time period, there's something called the Little Ice Age. And so that was a major global impact during this time period. And so him hopping over icebergs, it was some treacherous weather during the time period too. Now, this slide right here, in truth, he really was connected to the Jesuits. And so his title that you have there, that word right there, what that meant is you kind of had a legal contract. So when he got to America, how was he supposed to pay his way, right? He was a kid. Well, what was cool about him is he was, if you look at the communication, interpretation, formalize, so he was hired by the Jesuits because he was smart. And what did they use him for? He became a translator then. And so LeSueur's early life then, being this, he was trained in Europe and he was a son of a nobleman, blah, 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 he was able to go meet new tribes, learn the language, and then help the Jesuits understand what's going on. So I was like, ooh, smart dude. Now, that only lasted for a little while. He got ambitious, or evil, depending on how you want to tell the story. Now, at the time period, though, I invented the Father Marquette connection. No proof those two ever crossed paths, except where was LeSueur? Great Lakes with the Jesuits. Who was the Jesuit that was out there at the time? Marquette. And so it was like, wow, they had to have probably crossed paths. So I just faked that one and put it together for plot's sake. Now, his life then, starting off working for the Jesuits, he abandoned his commission. That comes back to haunt him later. There was money to be made with the fur trade, and he was smart first, and then he grew big second. So as the big dude on the frontier, he was able to protect himself. He could roam the Great Lakes. And so if you look at that then, what did I say? It was 1657. So when he was 23, he got denounced by the Jesuits for breaking the contract. He basically, not necessarily an outlaw because he was doing something that was legal, but he just gave up the whole Jesuit lifestyle to become a full-fledged fur trader. Now, the time period, the frontier was really unknown. They knew the Great Lakes and the little bit of, they put their toe on the shore and call it good. So they didn't really even know where the Mississippi River was. These were some things that they were just figuring out. For example, Father Hennepin, he wasn't a Jesuit. It's escaping my brain right now. Benedictine, maybe? I forget. Okay, but he was another religious order, and he went to go find where it began. He got in hot waters, and so everything that was in that area, it was literally the wild, wild west. They didn't know what was there even. The Jesuits then, one of the things they did that was suspicious to me is the Anishinaabe, who, again, that's the other book series that I work on. The Anishinaabe had this really interesting prophecy that told them to leave the Atlantic and travel to 7 different stopping places until they'd find their promised land. Okay, that's like a Sunday school simplified version of it. But what was wild about it is all the stops that the Anishinaabe made, the Jesuits also went the same spots and put up forts there. I was like, why are they so obsessed? So, I don't know, it was just some intriguing stuff for me. Now, the slide behind this one right here, the Beaver Wars. So that's where the kids' book, I had to make it really simple. But this was a fascinating time to just read about. The Iroquois had pushed into the Great Lakes, and they caused every tribe in their way to basically keep moving west. Now, you can only go so far west until you get to the Mississippi. And who's living on the other side of the Mississippi River? The Dakota. And so the Dakota were over here, and so those tribes that were refugees were kind of getting sandwiched between things. And so that was a major issue happening at that time period, and the Fox were the ones that were really throwing it in turmoil. About the same time Halley's Comet showed up in the sky, they relocated. It's we are going back to our ancestral birth lands. and we're going to reclaim it. And so they just moved suddenly, and all of a sudden all the refugees were all like, what is going on here? And so turmoil just boils up in LeSueur's backyard. And one of his friends, Nicholas Perot, these guys were just like trying to keep the fur industry going while there was major war happening amongst the tribes. Now this is a slide that, I made up the Winona connection. As I said, it's a real story, but I don't know if she was a real person. And so there was a lot of kind of time period that I just kind of fictionalized with that one. So that was just me. That's not historical with that one. Now this one right here was fascinating to me because I kept coming across it. Slavery between tribes. They would conquer and sell. It was really fascinating. And so during this time period then, again, if you want to look at it with dark lenses, the French were very interested about the Dakota Empire. They couldn't speak the language, and the Dakota were not interested in making allies either. And so what was fascinating about this time period then, historically, this is where some Dakota showed up at the trading post. And they had markings with blue paint or blue earth. And this is where, historically, it was all like, where'd that come from and where are you from? And all of a sudden, that was like the little trigger that kind of turned it into the next area. Now, at the time, again, Winona, make-believe, Chief Gaspar of the Huron was at Mackinac Island. And this guy was fascinating. Like I said, a guerrilla warrior, and he despised the Iroquois. So at any chance he had, he was like ready to go kill Iroquois. So it was a very violent time period. So he was playing the French and the English against each other. He was playing like tribes against each other. The only outcome he wanted was for the Iroquois to suffer. And so I was like, whoo, this is really bold. And so much so that he sets up the Iroquois Confederacy chiefs. I think there was like 30 or 40 of them that all came under Peachtree, and it was a trap. And they took all of them prisoner, and they shipped them off to the Caribbean islands. Oh, I know, because then it was all like, you better behave or we've got your guys. And so I was like, wow, this is happening at Mackinac Island? And so it was just fascinating to me that that was like neck deep in LeSueur's time period. He was there. He was the fur trading commander at Mackinac Island. And Adario was there too. I was like, oh wow, that's some political ploy there. Now this part right here is me fictionalizing a true mythology. A mythology that's accurate. And so as I said, Professor Lee from St. Cloud State University was the one that put me onto the Ton Wind legend. I bring that up because Joseph Nicollet labeled a section of Minnesota the Undine region, and Undine is an alchemy word, but it's the water symbol and it's the blue woman. And I was all like, did he know about Ton Wind too? And so it was one of those that I was like, it was fascinating to me. So I let that story creep into their discussions. In real life, it wasn't Winona that was going to bring him out to Minnesota. Adario was all like, hey, I'm really smart. Let me go with you. And so he and Adario then headed out, and he went out on his own. So there's kind of these like separate little incidents where they were curious about what the Dakota were all about. And so she basically represents what was kind of the situation. He said, you didn't want to go there. Now, her home I had be like the Haunted Valley, which is like that Mankato area. But that's where LeSueur purportedly went. The copper mine that he dug was the Mankato area. So I had to come up with some way for him to want to come out and find the Blue Earth. That was the kind of this little missing piece that I had to justify with my character, because I knew he did it. I just didn't know the why he did it. Ultimately, then, the real LeSueur visited the Mankato area. I know this because LeSueur could make maps too. And he gave a pretty rough estimate of where he went. And so men like Joseph Nicollet were all like, I'm going to find out where this guy went. I'm gonna go see if the Blue Earth is there, you know? So 150 years later, people were still trying to figure out exactly where LeSueur went. Now, Thomas Hughes then, a Blue Earth County historian, wrote Tales of the Haunted Valley. So I let it kind of go a little bit of, you know, supernaturally kind of stuff. And I liked, you know, the Indiana Jones stuff. So of course I wanted the, you know, what's creating the Blue Earth. I wanted it to be the Philosopher's Stone. There was the gold book that I have over there, the story of Lahatan, the pirate. He labeled the river of death. And he threw in some more alchemy clues. So I thought that was fascinating. There was an incident from the Nicollet story where Chief Sleepy Eyes heard that Nicollet was going into the Haunted Valley, and he refused to let him go alone because he worried the little guy was going to die. And so there's some reality to their fears about the Haunted Valley. And so that's something that I kind of hammered in there. Now here's the thing. It's like, if you want somebody to stay away from it, think like how the U.S. military would go. You know, it's like, oh man, you can't go there. You know, there's been some toxic waste dump thing. So telling stories about how horrible this place is also is a way of protecting it. But I had to figure out the whole why. That was some really intriguing stuff. Ultimately, my pirate, this little Frenchman by the name of Louis Armand de L'Homme d'Arcy, the Baron of Lahatan, showed up in the LeSueur story. I was like, who the heck is this guy? And he showed up with a private army. He's got like a militia of like several hundred men. Like, hello, I'm rich, I'm entitled. And he just shows up, he bounces around. When he hears about the LeSueur Blue Earth story, he gets LeSueur in trouble with the Jesuits, gets LeSueur sent back to Montreal, he takes over Mackinac Island, and then abandons his post. He burns all the forts that had been built under French authority. It was a crock, you know, but he burnt them all down. Then he went to, and he wrote about this, he went to the Haunted Valley, found the spot where the earth bled blue, and you know what he did? He went over there, took out this post and this big lead placard that said, "The Kingdom of France hereby claims all of this territory. You're now our subjects." And he leaves. Now, what does that do to the Dakota and their sacred Haunted Valley concept? Right? Those are fighting words, aren't they? So he basically sets the whole frontier on fire and then leaves. Now, that's the other story. He hopped on a pirate ship and off he went. Okay? I was like, he's fascinating. And so that's what Lahatan was doing. Nicolas Perrault almost gets killed, and then war breaks out between England and France at the same time this is happening. So Canada, New France, was almost erased off the map because, they could handle the English. The English were no problem. Who suddenly destroyed their entire colony? The Dakota got mad because people had intruded into their land. And where's this one at? I think it's the next slide. I'll find it maybe later. The way I found it. Now, back in Montreal, though, while war is going on, this is where it gets a little crazy. LeSueur's in-laws were the Lemoyne family. And these guys were old school, aristocratic families. He had 13 boys, Mr. Lemoyne did. He meets Marguerite Messier. He marries into kind of like French royalty in Montreal. And what's weirdest though, is he has apparently the most beautiful woman on America as a new wife. He's wealthy. All of his fur trading money, he bought a nice house in Montreal, and he's a soldier with war experience while a war is going on. What do? They send him back to France. With what, historically? A box of Blue Earth. And so this is where I'm all like, what is going on with this stupid story? Now, I'm not saying my story is the stupid one. I'm saying, like, the historical LeSueur, I was just like, well, why are you doing this? And so that's where it became this like paradoxical puzzle for me, because I was all like, that don't make no sense. And so that's where I was like going down. I had to go down the Blue Earth hole, didn't I? Now, as fate would have it, he does get all the way back to Paris, and he meets a guy by the name of Alexander LeSueur, who happens to be his fermier général. He was an alchemist. Nicolet brought him the Blue Earth, and he funded a warship, a crew of soldiers, and a whole bunch of miners to go back and dig up the Blue Earth that's in Mankato. Okay? That's what the King of France could chunk official documents now. He gets commissioned to do that. Leaves his wife and kids behind. He's now going back across the Atlantic, which was a risky thing to do during war. Sure enough, he leaves France and he gets kidnapped by English pirates who were waiting in Lurk for him. They ambushed them when they were leaving. I forget what the port name is. It's in the book. As soon as they were leaving, the English pirates show up, murder everybody, and take LeSueur with them. I was like, whoa, this is. You see why I got intrigued by this story, just like Joseph Nicolet did? It's like, why didn't they just kill the big guy? So they bring him back, and that's where all of a sudden I was like, oh, yeah, Captain Kidd, pirates, and Sir Isaac Newton, his family crest.
Crossbones of pirates.
Before the Jolly Roger took off as a thing. Because like Blackbeard and all those pirates, that's about like 30, 40 years from now. I was all like, what the heck? So he's a former scientist that is obsessed with the end of the world, and he's an alchemist, and he's got pirate connections. I was all like, he is definitely my villain. And so I was just like, wow. So he was the master of the mint. Isaac Newton was there. You know, he was a prisoner. And so they just kept him locked up. What value does he have? That's why I was perplexed by this story. Now, this one right here, the real life stuff. So he's locked in jail in England, and Louise Joliet vanishes from the face of the earth at that time period. The Lemoynes go up to Hudson Bay to try to retake that area away, so they go in there to try to set up a post. The English defeat them. So then what are they going to try next? They go down to the Gulf of Mexico. They send one of their buddies with them, LaSalle. LaSalle fails. So what are they trying to get to is the mysterious thing. Well, they're trying to get around where the Dakota went. The Dakota had pushed all the way into Ohio. My niece swam at the Lakota swimming pool in Monroe, Ohio. I was like, what the crap? How dare you guys take a name from South Dakota and put it here in Ohio? And all of a sudden I was like talking to it. I was like, oh no, you see the Lakota, we found some archaeology, and that's why we called it Lakota swimming. I was like, what? Yeah, we've got archaeology about the Lakota people being out here in the late 1600s. I was like, whoa. And so they were in this area. So what were the French trying to do? Get around them. How do you get around them? You can go up that way, up the Red River, or you can go up the Mississippi River. But they couldn't do it. Who's the only one that's been able to do it so far? So they let LeSueur out of prison. It's like, seriously? They give him another armed expedition. They give him another crew of miners. His brothers then, you've heard about Louisiana, right? Okay. There's a book, you probably have it, you just received some acclaim, The Pelican Girls, or something like that. Yeah, that's the name of LeSueur's ship. I was like, are you kidding me? The New Orleans Pelicans, the basketball team, LeSueur's ship. And so what ends up happening then, while he was in prison, his brothers-in-law, for him, went down and created the Louisiana colony. For him. Why? Because he needed an outpost to stage before he went up the Mississippi River. Why is he going up the Mississippi River? To mine. What's he mining? Copper. Is there copper in Mankato? No. And so suddenly I was like, what is this crazy story? So you see what I mean? They're going through a lot of really difficult things to pull off this real life story. I was like, what the crap? So you created the New Orleans colony so Pierre-Charles LeSueur could take a break before he went. It's like, God, this is crazy. Now, in real life then, the crew, there was a guy named Andre Pennicott. Pennicott wrote about this stuff. So most of this section right here, right out of the Pennicott narrative. And so I was like, this is crazy. Now, along the way, everybody and their mother hopped in the expedition. There were Jesuits hopping on, there were Canadians from up north hopping on. And so suddenly it's like everybody wanted to be part of this expedition. And so I was like, that's really weird. Now, ultimately then, they go all the way up the Mississippi River, come down the Minnesota River, and then they get out, they go into the Blue Earth River, and ultimately they end up in Blue Earth County. That's the history, okay? Now, Pennicott narrative, though, is why I have my suspicions. So everybody's like, well, that's history. LeSueur came out in like 1700 and he stayed until 1701, and he, this is what he did. I was just like, okay, that's fine, but did you really read the Pennicott narrative? Because the guy's crazy. And so he describes how there's a mountain that has perpetual fog hanging on it. So that's how you know when you're to the right spot, because it's Foggy Mountain, we'll call it. And so it was like just these ridiculous exaggerations. I was all like, I don't trust this Andre Pennicott character. Meanwhile, the Dakota and Chippewa, where they were up north fighting the Dakota. So this whole secret mission, he was able to come up from the south without anybody knowing. And the French were in the north distracting the Dakota. I was like, wow, this is like orchestrated chaos here. And so where this was, that's where Joseph Nicollet said, it's Mankato. Now, this is another one where the real life story about LeSueur got a little crazy. A September blizzard came in, which until I read about the Little Ice Age sounded ridiculous to me. The 4 feet of snow. I'm like, okay, whatever. But then Pennicott described exploding trees. It got so cold, the trees exploded. I was like, that's really cold, Andre. And my favorite one was, and you also have to be careful of the tree bears. There were bears that lived inside of the trees around Mankato, where it's perpetually foggy and there's a mountain. So you got to watch out for the bear trees, because they come out of the trees and they eat you and kill you. And I'm like, are you talking about raccoons? What's a tree bear? And so it got a little crazy. Now, they get saved by the grace of God when they heard a buffalo get stuck in the snow. So that was like another real life one that I pulled right out of the story. LeSueur then built a palisade fort up on top of a hill. So he built Fort Le Hillier, it was called. And this was part I didn't make up either. Now, Winona was a make-believe character. But while they were camping there, I think it was the Warpacootie, is how they wrote it back then. One of the branches of the Dakota, it was Dakota people, they showed up at LeSueur's fort and said, you gotta get out of here. The Metawakan see this as their sacred home. They're up north now by the Mille Lacs area. They camp at a place called Cokato. That's the halfway mark. And when they get down here, they're going to kill every last one of you for violating this sacred space. You got to get out of here. Come over here where it's safer. And LeSueur was having none of it. Now, the most curious part for me then is when they showed up, LeSueur was able to speak with them. And that was baffling to me because, when did he learn the Dakota language? So you see why I needed to invent a Winona? Because I was like, how the heck did he ever learn it? And so that was intriguing to me that he was able to communicate with them and understand what they were all about. Now, there's no copper ore and there's no philosopher's stone. Okay, so that was kind of, again, but the thing that really, really baffled me is it was cool because is there Blue Earth at Mankato? Absolutely. If you didn't see when the Rapidan Dam went out and all that backwater drained, you could, there's the Blue Earth. But it is not the same as copper ore. You know, the dirt that's in Mankato is not close to what copper ore is all about. And LeSueur worked the Great Lakes. He worked the Keweenaw Peninsula. There's literally copper laying out on the ground there. So the fact that his copper mine story is bogus, because he did not have to come to Mankato to mine copper, nor is there really copper. And if he was dumb enough to dig this stuff up, that doesn't make any sense to me, because the guy was this genius level linguist. And so I was like, he knows what copper is. And is there any value for them to have a copper mine in Mankato at the time period? Zero. So this is where the story just became ridiculous. So I was like, hey, I'm going to play with it. I'm going to just let it be the Philosopher's Stone. And so that's where I was like, okay, somebody's lying to the historians now. And so I was just like, since they're lying to the historians, I'm just going to have fun with it. So the real the real Pierre-Charles LeSueur loaded up barges full of his blue earth. He left his miners behind. He left his soldiers behind. And I read this stuff in the Louisiana history and annals and stuff like that. I found it with one of the Louisiana guys. I forget who it was exactly. But they said then that LeSueur, he went all Captain Morgan, where he was such a big guy, he stood at the front of the first barge with a big axe, and he sailed all the way down the Mississippi River. And the historian that saw him show up in New Orleans said, it's like, well, it made sense, because the guy was like twice as big as the normal man, and no one would tangle with him. So he was able to protect his barges by himself while he left his crew behind. Now, again, the perplexing thing that drove me nuts. So he barges up, puts it on a ship, sails back to France, goes to King Louis, goes to Alexander Le Houlier, brings them the blue dirt. Historically, was it copper? No. They spent so much money for him to bring back worthless blue dirt. And we're talking the land of the guillotine, right? Guess what they did to him? Guess what horrible torture devices they came up for this guy? How could he come back to France knowing they were going to mangle him up so badly? Oh wait, they made him governor of Alabama.
Serves him right.
That's the punishment? Okay, you're funny, I like that. So what was weird about this is he came back without anything of value. And his guys got killed while he was gone. Complete and utter failure. And the king gives him the Louisiana colony as a reward. I was like, I give up on this story now, because that doesn't make any sense either. He failed publicly, and you're rewarding him with like one of the most lucrative things on the entire continent right now? You get Louisiana? They called it Alabama at the time, but. And so that's where I was all like, okay, things just aren't jiving. In the Pennicott story, he was like the sole survivor that came back from Fort Le Hilier like years later and told everybody what happened really. And so his story is like very suspicious. He throws the Fox Indians under the bus. He's like, yeah, the Fox Indians got us. Like, okay, Andre, I know where the Fox Indians are from. They live at Green Bay. Okay, going from Green Bay to Mankato, does that make any sense? To kill a bunch of guys that made a fort that doesn't matter to you? And so that was like troublesome. And then history took over. But I had to tie together all those plots. And so that's where sometimes a little make-believe makes it more fun. So that's my little story about that one. And LeSueur's wife then, Marguerite, she ends up packing up the family and going to Louisiana. And just as a weird coincidence, like a chauvinist pig?
Yeah.
Okay. Nicolet's descendants, when Dad, LeSueur's descendants, when Dad died and didn't come back to Alabama, Louisiana, they changed their last name to Chauvin. And in Louisiana, there's this whole genealogy list of these great big giant size chauvins. Even so much so that the word chauvinist comes from these great big macho men that descended from LeSueur. I was all like, that's fun. Okay, I'm going on too much. I need to wrap this up. Okay, sorry guys. All right, so again, blah, blah, blah. I could like finish some things. So the whole thing that I was left with then is like, what was real and what was make-believe. So I had to kind of have it a little open-ended with this one because I had the real LeSueur doing things that just didn't make any sense. So I will stop now because I've exceeded what I was hoping for, and I'll just let you guys ask questions if you want to ask questions now.